Hello and welcome to YHTV's Magical Medical Tour. This is episode 53. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christina Suzama, and with me is our wonderful medical guide, Dr. Glenn Woolman. What's up, Doc?
Greetings, Christina. How are you?
Oh, wonderful.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that.
Yes.
Today's going to be great. I've been looking forward to one of these conversations since we started. We're going to be talking today with Tracy Harrison. She is a health and wellness counselor who focuses on helping people to eat with purpose. And I think in many cases, people eat to live. Some people live to eat. Some people do variations on both of those themes. And I think today we're going to find out a lot of the questions that people are asking about foods, all of the different things that are happening in the food market and comparing food and health and the things that we should know and shouldn't know. So I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of questions today. So I think maybe this would be a good time for you to tell our audience how to get in touch with us if they have a question for Tracy.
If there's time for their questions, I might have so many.
I would think so. Me too. There's just so many questions. I may just ask for one-sentence answers on everything because I have thousands of questions.
No, we'll just have to bring her back,
It's a good idea. This will just be the appetizer.
There you go. So if you are watching this live on your computer, you can actually scroll down and there's a little comment box at the bottom there where you can add your comment or your question and press submit, and it will show up on my screen and I will read it to our guest and she can answer. And if you would prefer to ask it yourself, you are more than welcome to call into our conference line at 323-476-3672. Again, 323-476-3672. And you would be asked for a PIN number, and that number is 607-393-POUND. 607-393-POUND. And not to worry, if you haven't written that down, it will actually show up on the screen during this live show. So we welcome all your comments and questions. Please feel free to do so.
Yes, I personally would like to welcome everyone. Greetings to Magical Medical Tour. I am Dr. Glenn Woolman. I will be your host along with Christina today as we search another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy for optimal health. And I can think of nothing better than talking about nutrition today. So I want to get into this right away, and I would like to introduce our viewing audience and to you, Christina, Tracy Harrison. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, Glenn. Good morning.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you for
Christina.
honoring us on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We just want to give you a little piece of sunshine from the West Coast.
Oh, indeed. It's snowing here, so it's quite welcome. Thank you.
Let's not tell anyone where you are so they could think it's snowing everywhere, but where we are. Tracy, as the medical guide, I like to tell our audience the path I'm hoping to take today, of course, knowing that none of this may happen. But I want to start out learning a little bit about you and your history when you got interested in health and wellness and nutrition, what brought you to where you are today, what your interests are in that area. Then we'll learn a little bit about what you actually do now on a daily basis in your practice. And then we'll start getting into some specific questions about nutrition and foods and dieting and what's good and what's not. How's that sound to you?
That sounds great. Let's go.
Okay, let's go. So let's start out with when you started. What happened? What got you interested? And what took you on your direction to bring you here?
That's a fun question for me because it really was a major life transition. I had the pleasure of being raised in a restaurant and catering family,
Hmm.
and have always had a strong love of food and love to cook, and was certainly taught how to cook well, especially good Southern food, as a child. But I had a very long, successful career in high tech science in the semiconductor industry, and have always loved chemistry, and enjoyed 17 years in semiconductors, and went on an outward bound adventure into the mountains of Rocky Mountains in Colorado. And one of the things you do on an outward bound adventure is what's called a solo, where you spend 24, 36 hours by yourself in a little 100 square foot plot of land, trying to figure out what you need to say to yourself. And it turns out, after you've watched an ant crawl about 50 yards over a 10-hour period, you start to say some pretty bold things to yourself. And what I had to say is that it was time for a change. It was time to challenge myself with a new career opportunities, and a new way of helping people. I loved semiconductors. I loved being a manager. I love supporting individuals to be happier in their work environment. And I was really craving a way to work more directly with people one on one. And really, through just a lot of exploration and conversations with friends and synchronicity, certainly, I decided to explore the notion of nutrition, how to help people to get healthier and happier by changing what they put in their mouths. I certainly saw in the corporate world the number of people who were stressed out and exhausted, and struggling emotionally and physically, in large part because how they fed themselves was way, way, way down on the priority list. And I certainly know firsthand, and have now seen through thousands of clients, just how much you can change your experience of life by simply changing up what you choose to eat. So I went back to school. I've done a tremendous amount of selective additional clinical training, and here I am, just delighted and feel very blessed to have changed gears and found a new career helping people in a much more personal way.
That's really good. Part of what we do on this show is to let people, especially kids that are thinking about careers, uh, to have the opportunity to speak with people that go into careers. And it's nice that you had a career and then went into yourself and came out with another career, which is great. Thinking that we maybe all should be on outward bound journeys to go inward certain times. So, so at this point, you don't consider yourself a nutritionist, do you? Or do you?
That's a great question. I do not. I do not. Technically, a nutritionist is someone that would be an LCN, a licensed clinical nutritionist, which in most states, it does vary by state, but in most states is someone who has a master's degree in specifically in human nutrition or a related field, and then has passed a very specific board's test. Or some people who would refer to themselves as a nutritionist are actually a registered dietitian, which is actually a different curricula and board qualifying exam. But my preparation, my schooling is actually much more diverse than that. I've certainly studied quite a bit of nutrition, both at the Institute of Integrative Nutrition as well as the University of Bridgeport. But I've also studied food science, functional medicine, and biochemistry quite a bit, wanting really to go beyond customizing diets or helping people to understand specific nutrient deficiencies, but really looking at the etiology of chronic disease. That's really my passion. Is especially in the gastrointestinal and the autoimmune disease arena, to help people to unwind why they have a disease. I'm a very, very big believer that the body's natural state is one of seeking wellness. And when it isn't well, there's a reason. We're not, we may have genetic predispositions for certain diseases, but by and large, we behave our way into acquiring those diseases. And my focus, my passion, my expertise is really helping people to understand how nutrients play a role in both the etiology of disease and suffering, but also in the unwinding and healing from it.
Well, I like that, and I want to get into a lot of that. You mentioned integrative nutrition. How is that different than nutrition?
That's a great question. The Institute of Integrative Nutrition is a school that is based in New York, and it is not a degree program. It's a certification program that lasts about a year. And for me, it was a really wonderful opportunity to springboard into a new career. It certainly didn't come close to providing the clinical or the biochemical background that I've needed to build my career, but it was a wonderful foundation that features learning about dozens and dozens of different nutrition and eating philosophies. So
Hmm.
rather than promoting a certain one, we get to learn about Ayurvedic eating and Paleolithic eating and veganism and vegetarianism and literally dozens and dozens of different ways of eating. Really, with I think promoting the truth that I believe in very strongly, that there is not a magic way of eating that works for everyone. Many people are looking for that holy grail of nutrition. Just tell me how to do it so I can be at my best health. But what makes me feel the best and what makes you feel the best may be very different. And I think we in nutrition discussions we would be better suited to helping one another by asking what makes you as a unique person feel the best, as opposed to proselytizing that there's a right answer that everyone needs to follow. Uh,
Ah, very nice. I like that. I'd like to maybe start with a few simple definitions of things. As we get deeper, we're going to be using a lot of different words, and I just want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. So we talk about nutrients. I know they're macronutrients, micronutrients. Would you tell us a little bit about that, just so that we're all talking about the same thing?
Sure, that's great. Great question. Macronutrients are the things that we get caloric energy from. So when we think about foods, those are made up of protein, fat, and carbohydrates. When we eat things like an apple or a carrot, by and large, the macronutrients we are getting are carbohydrates. When we consume things like an avocado or flaxseed or some type of oil, like an olive oil, what we're getting is primarily fats. When we look at things such as beef or chicken or salmon, what we're getting is primarily proteins. Those are macronutrients, and we think of them as being vehicles for calories. There are certain types of molecules. Micronutrients we think about as being more about the nourishment of food. The primary categories of micronutrients are things like vitamins and minerals. There are actually many other ones, but vitamins and minerals are particular molecules that we get from food that our bodies need in order to complete certain biochemical reactions in order to run us. And there are a number of essential minerals, and certainly vitamins are essential. The definition of a vitamin is a substance that the body has to have in small amounts that it cannot produce on its own. And this is why we have a limited number of vitamins and a limited number of essential minerals, things like magnesium and sodium and potassium are essential minerals. Vitamins are things like vitamin A and vitamin D and vitamin E, which are what we call fat soluble vitamins, or things like vitamin B12 or vitamin B6, which are water soluble vitamins. We do have to get those from our food or from a supplement, but we have to get them externally in order to thrive. But beyond vitamins and minerals, which is what most people think of in terms of nutrients, there's this huge world, especially from plant foods, of what we call phytonutrients. And perhaps the best example of that is let's take a stalk of broccoli. A stalk of broccoli has some vitamin A, some vitamin E, some vitamin C, but it actually has over 500 different unique identifiable nutrients in it. So the vitamins are a tiny subset of the array of phytonutrients or phytochemicals, or what most people loosely call antioxidants, that we get especially from plant foods. And in the past decade or so, we're just beginning to broach the surface of understanding what all of these nutrients do in order to help us to thrive. When, even though we don't understand how they work, our body has obviously evolved for tens and thousands of years eating these things and pulls from it what it needs. We're starting to learn the magic of some of these, and I hope we'll get into that and talk about a few of them. You can't really pick up a newspaper or a magazine these days without seeing a news flash on a new phytonutrient that we've discovered and the value that it adds to thriving.
Well, I think we've got some good definitions so far. I'd like to talk for a little while just so that we get an idea of what you do. You talk about many things about helping people to eat purposefully and also to unwind and to find out relations between an illness and foods that are going into the body. So could you give us just a few minutes on how you see a patient? What kind of a patient do you see? Do you call them patients? Are they clients? What's your workup for somebody when you start to work with them, and how does that happen?
Sure, that's a great question. So, in my work as a health and wellness counselor, I call them clients, and I do all of my work remotely, either via phone or Skype, just like we're doing here, which has allowed me to work with people all over the United States and in foreign countries as well. And I really enjoy doing a very lengthy, in depth intake session with each of my clients. It's very, very important for me to spend some time listening to their health history, their symptoms, and also their intuition about the dis-ease. I like that phrase, dis-ease, as opposed to disease in the body. And I will also take a look at lab work that's been done in the past, or diagnostic testing, in order to understand what has already been found, perhaps in their body, in terms of imbalances. And it helps me to make a map based on what they share on some of the biochemical dynamics that might be contributing to their disease or their discomfort, their inflammatory symptoms. And I will often recommend that my clients, either right at the beginning, which I guess is preferable, or certainly as we move along working together, pursue some follow up testing in order to help to give us data to more accurately target our work together. And my clients might pursue that testing with their primary care physician, or maybe with a specialist. Fortunately, there's a fair amount of testing, especially saliva or urine testing, that's available actually online these days, where if people are not able to get it through their physician, they can sometimes access test kits on their own in order to learn more about their body, which is a really exciting innovation, I think, in medical diagnostic availability. But I'm often looking for things like basic nutrient testing, serum levels or red blood cell levels of certain minerals, or organic acid testing. We can measure the presence of certain organic acids in the body that are secreted by our cells in response to a deficiency in a certain nutrient. We can test for detoxification ability, the liver's ability to process toxins down certain transformative pathways to keep toxins from building up in our body, rather, as opposed to being processed and excreted. I do a fair amount of food allergy and food sensitivity testing. It's amazing to me how often that is a major driver for systemic inflammation in the body. I think we're going to really start to see the medical research and media explode about that in the next 10 or 15 years. And then also stool testing. The old adage, I think, from perhaps Hippocrates a couple thousand years ago about all disease beginning in the gut is certainly being shown to be biochemically and physiologically accurate. A tremendous amount of what happens in our gut, not just from our food, but also from the microbes in our gut, informs our immune system, informs our nervous system, informs our metabolism. And so often the data clues we're looking for can be found in a stool test. So there's a wide array of testing, hormone testing, as well as traditional medical testing. Now, there's a lot of pearls to be found in simple things like a CBC or CMP. That's a complete blood count or a complete metabolic panel, which is very typical annual checkup lab work, if you will. There's very often some pearls in that data with regard to nutrient deficiencies as well. So I am a scientist at heart. I love data. And I think I do my best work in working with clients when we really have sufficient data available to inform the progress that I take in working with clients one-on-one.
It seems to me that many times people can understand something intellectually, especially when it comes to health. So you do that part. You get the intellectual part to these people. You could look and you could say, we've done this stool sample on you. We've done this testing on your saliva and hormones, and this is what I find. So now they understand it from an intellectual level. But getting somebody to change something that they've been doing all their life, especially in the society that we live in today, with all of the good, bad, and ugly choices that are out there. How do you get somebody to change and have it stay with them?
That is a great question because certainly awareness of a fact or education of a fact does not in any way, shape, or form predispose one to change their behavior in that direction. And I like to say that my practice is really equal parts education, because I think being able to explain data or physiological facts or biochemical facts in a way that people can understand is really important. So that we're not talking above people's heads, but we're really helping them to get it mentally is very important. But half education, half inspiration. Because if people are not really inspired to change their habits, no amount of education is going to make a difference. I think you raise an excellent point. I have perhaps the advantage that my typical client has been struggling with some sort of chronic disease or sustained inflammatory symptoms for a number of years. The typical one has already seen a few specialists, has tried a number of medications, and if anything, has maybe achieved a little bit of relief, but certainly not full relief, and definitely not healing. A lot of conventional allopathic treatment in chronic disease, not acute disease, but a chronic disease, is really about band-aiding symptoms and helping people to feel better, which is wonderful, but not necessarily getting at the true root cause of disease and alleviating it. So I offer all that by way of saying my typical client is really sick and tired of being sick and tired. And in that sense, they're really already inspired. But I think a key part of change for any of us is realizing that our behaviors to date have gotten us to where we are. And so it's really illogical to expect things to magically change unless we're willing to shift our behaviors. And I think the strategy that works the best with most people is gradual step by step change. Most of us are not willing to turn our lives upside down in one fell swoop. But many, many people have committed to progress, and especially as they begin to feel better and their commitment, their faith, their confidence rises, will make a little bit of change this week and a little more change next week and a little more next week and a little more next week. And at the end of 3 or 4 months is in a completely different place than they were before, having achieved that really gradually in a way that wouldn't have been possible if they tried to make the wholesale shift overnight.
Hmm.
um, I'd like to remind our audience, because we have quite a few viewers right now. So if you would like to scroll down on your screen and ask a question or make a comment, please do so. And remember to click submit, and I can read it out to our guest or Dr. Woolman. And if you would like to ask that question yourself, please feel free to call in, because that's always lovely to hear your voice. And we're always very welcoming of that. Again, the number is 323-476-3672. And the PIN is 607393 pound. Tracy, this is so exciting what you do. It's magnificent. And for me, it's inspirational because you know the science, you know the data, because so many people I've run into, that's what they want. They have to hear that. If it's not backed up by a science, they don't care. They don't want anything to do with it. They want to know that it is all science-based, and so it gives them a different kind of hope. And I'm assuming that's because of the way our society is made up.
Well, I think something I really try hard to do is to really be a bridge for my clients between the guidance they're getting from their physician and then their self-motivated efforts to feel better that they might pursue based on what they hear in the media or what a friend told them or what they saw online. I believe we've got this big gap today in between that, where your typical physician, certainly with Glenn accepted, your typical physician, I find, is not very schooled in nutrition. Maybe very interested, but certainly today, unfortunately, we still have the situation where your typical medical school does not promote any significant nutritional curricula. And so you certainly can't teach what you don't know. And I think people are looking for an opportunity to make a difference in their own lives. They don't just want to feel like their wellness is a default or that their genetics are a default. They want to do something about it, and that they want to believe and know that their behavior can make a difference. And I love partnering with my clients' physicians in terms of trying to be that bridge for helping them to understand what they can actually do that will help them to feel better. And boy, once that starts and people actually see and experience better wellness, my pain is gone, my headaches are gone, I'm not constipated, I feel better, I'm not depressed, I don't have panic attacks anymore. People get on fire with motivation to make change. And that's like a firework.
Right.
It just shoots off like a rocket, and people want more and more and more. And this is where I feel very strongly that there's a huge role for health counselors in general that is just burgeoning. And we're going to see it really explode within the next several years, because people want that level of support. They really do. There's a huge demand for health counselor support.
Yeah, it seems like people are getting very tired of the bandages. It's like, you put the bandage on, but it's not quite fully healed. Well, if you're not healing from the inside, etc. The awareness is growing. I believe that people are striving towards that. So I agree there. Now, are doctors open to working with you? Or is there a little bit of a hesitation, like you're crashing in their territory a little bit?
I think the honest answer to that is it varies wildly. There are a number of physicians that I actually partner with routinely. I send my clients to them; they send their patients to me, and it goes anywhere from maybe client feedback saying, "My physician looked at all of the lab work that you'd like to see, and he's okay with that. We're going to run it all, and I'll let you know what the results are. He'd like to exchange emails with you to share interpretations, and would like to know what you're going to do with me, so that he can put that in my file," which is lovely. I welcome the collaboration, and it goes from that all the way down to I don't know what half of these markers are, or I really don't think any of these are merited because you're not sick, or you don't have a disease that I would normally run these for. And I think that's a challenge sometimes for the conventional model that is looking perhaps more often to manage disease rather than keeping people from getting it in the first place.
Right.
which is what in some cases, I'm very focused on that, where maybe someone comes to me because of everyone in their family has heart disease and they don't want to get it. Which is really my favorite type of person to help, because it's a chance to get in front of not only their illness, but also their burden on the healthcare system.
Hmm.
How wonderful to help someone up front to help themselves and avoid being sick, avoid having huge medical bills, and avoid the quality of life crunch that
Yes.
happens from feeling bad. Nobody wants to feel bad.
Hmm.
But I'd say it really varies, and everything in between. I love it when I receive a phone call or an email from a physician saying, I don't know why you want this data, but I want to know. Can we talk?
Mm.
And there's an opportunity to learn and have an exchange. A lot of my training has come from the Institute of Functional Medicine, which is an amazing organization that provides continuing education, primarily to physicians. That is about exploring the biochemical foundation of disease, and the interconnectedness of the body, and the fact that what is happening in the gut can absolutely affect what's happening neurologically in the brain,
Mm.
or what's happening in the cardiovascular system can absolutely affect what's happening in the neurological system or in the immune system. And that we're the model of working with specialties breaks down in many areas of chronic disease, because obviously the body is interconnected. Everything is affecting everything else. So the answer to your question is the response varies wildly, and
Hmm.
that's okay. It's everyone's coming at this from a different perspective. But sometimes the responses are comical and sometimes frustrating. But we work with it and move on. And I do the best I can to support each and every client, no matter where their physician is coming from.
Mm-mm. And I would also think that, which I've experienced a little bit of as well, is what the individual's insurance is willing to cover.
Yes.
That plays a huge part, I would think.
It does. And I have to tell you, Christina, this is very interesting. I am amazed at what type of diagnostic testing some insurance companies will cover and other
Hmm.
ones won't. Even in the face of a formal disease diagnosis, it's astounding to me what I guess the medical research staff at various insurance companies has decided is or isn't helpful in helping someone to heal or helping someone to avoid future medical costs. It really varies wildly.
Mm.
And certainly in some cases, my clients find that their insurance company will not pay for a test, but they pursue it anyway, even with out of pocket cash expenditure, because they want to be well. The uh, Often people's quality of life has suffered so much that they're more than willing to put non-insurance money, their own personal funds, into diagnostic testing to get to the bottom of what's going on in their unique body.
And um, what about children? I mean, do you see quite a array of age groups, from children's to elders?
I do work with a very wide variety of clients in
Hmm.
terms of age and both sexes and backgrounds and everything. I don't have an expertise in working specifically with children. I've worked with a number of teenagers, and I have certainly worked with parents who wanted to support their children in overcoming various challenges. But for working with children directly, I think that that's actually better suited for working with a health counselor in person. I
Hmm.
think it's hard for children to work with the whole remote connection, and it's much easier for them to build trust
Hmm.
and rapport with a health counselor in person. So there are a number of health counselors who do that very successfully, but it's
Hmm.
not a focus and certainly not an expertise of mine.
Hmm. Because I think of because your love and passion of diseases,
Yeah.
that there is so much that are that come up with children, that, of course, parents being parents, of course, and protective, they are so much now on the forefront of finding all the possibilities that would help support their child, that what you do would be so magnificent for them.
Mm.
Mhm.
And certainly, I think a big benefit of anyone working with a health counselor is that the changes that they bring on board generally end up being healthy and beneficial for their entire family.
Mhm. Mhm.
Individuals are implementing it in a household or in a family environment. I have a lot of passion for children and children's diets, in particular, because I think it's all too easy for us to assume that they're just a kid, they can handle it.
Right.
It's right to drink all this soda and live off of sugar and flour and cheese, and their little bodies will handle it. There's plenty of time for them to get over it later. And it's interesting because we know through medical research that that is not true. While their little bodies are indeed resilient, we know that the beginnings of inflammation and the beginnings of even things like atherosclerotic plaque are
Mm.
commonplace in the arteries of 13-year-olds. This has actually been studied. They are not immune to these effects. I think it is a credit to the resiliency of the human body that they can withstand the effect of it for a decade or more before the large scale symptoms start to manifest maybe when they're in the 20s. But the trigger for that did indeed start when they were 5, 6, 7. And in that sense, I really want to encourage all parents who are fighting the battle of trying to feed kids healthy food, even though their peers, the food media, and to some extent the health media is really working against them, because it does matter. It is
Mhm.
an important effort, and it really is going to help to serve those children better for having healthier adulthoods.
Mhm, mhm. Oh, that's wonderful that you said that. I mean, it's hard to imagine because through the generations, it's yeah, you can give it to the child, they'll get over it. They can withstand anything. you I see it all the time in the schools right now. So it's
Right.
kind of it is frightening, but it takes individuals like you and Glenn that come out and share and create that awareness that will help us as parents and educators to pass it down.
Mm.
We have you back, Glenn.
Yes. Tracy, I want to ask you a number of questions that I would like some quick answers on, and uh, and then see if we can go back and talk about them a little bit later. We hear all the time about diets and dieting: low fat, low protein, high protein, mixed carb, low carb. What's your thought quickly on diets and dieting?
Well, let's see. Generally, diets don't work. I believe the statistics are that 92% of people who go on a diet gain the weight back. Because ultimately, the only thing that helps people to lose weight and keep it off is lifestyle change, permanent lifestyle change. As I said before, I think the way of eating that helps people to have their optimal weight varies by person. So there's not really a magic answer, but pretty much something that works for everyone, in my experience, is eating real food, as Michael Pollan likes to say, eating food, not food like substances.
Mhm.
So real whole food and eating a lower glycemic diet. And by that, I mean a diet that doesn't spike blood sugar very much. And in particular, that's going to be a diet that minimizes sweeteners and also minimizes refined carbohydrates, like things made out of flour. Generally
Okay,
speaking, our food culture is way too overloaded with both of those things.
excellent. What are your thoughts on GMO products?
Mm. Genetically modified organisms, GMO. Um, that is a relatively modern way of hybridizing a plant in a way that's totally unnatural. We're basically crossing a plant with a bacteria gene and giving the plant some characteristics that it would normally never have in the wild, like resistance to a weed killer. I think research actually, despite a lot of propaganda from the makers of GMO products or industry participants, I think the data is very clear that GMO foods are well perceived by the human immune system as being foreign and can exacerbate immune system reactions, especially things like allergy and asthma. The three foods that most people encounter on a daily basis that are almost universally genetically modified in the American diet are corn and soybeans and canola. And the only way right now in the US to completely avoid GMO foods, which I do highly recommend, is to purchase organic foods. The organic standard includes a number of different criteria, but one of them is the screening out of any GMO ingredients. So, as a result, I really recommend purchasing organic corn chips or purchasing organic soy milk because it's the only way to make sure that you're not getting GMOs in those foods.
What is organic?
Organic, as we use it today in food science, is food in terms of plant foods, foods that have been raised agriculturally, or animals that have been raised in a way that doesn't involve any synthetic pesticides. And that's the primary definition. Organic standard is actually a list of about 9 or 10 particular tenets, but the primary one is the absence of synthetic pesticides or chemicals involved in both the growth and then the processing of that food. And in that sense, it really is natural. But there's definitely some gray space in the organic standards where farms are still allowed to use some pesticides if there's no proven natural way to prevent pests. So the organic standard is not pure, but I really do believe strongly that it is in the best interest of everyone's wellness to eat as much organic food as they can find and as they can afford, which is limiting for a number of people on both fronts.
The diet that most of us grew up on and we see all the time, you think about steak and potatoes. And now we're talking about food combining, and we're finding out that maybe steak and potatoes, which has been a standard for so many years, is not necessarily a good idea. Talk to us about food combining a little and your thoughts on it.
Okay, sure. Food combining is the science of eating foods in combinations in a meal or a snack that are going to promote the efficient digestion and absorption of those foods. So when we consume foods that are primarily protein, so things like the steak that you described, most of the digestion of that food is going to happen in the stomach, in the upper portion of the gastrointestinal tract, in a very acidic environment. If you eat foods that are very high in carbohydrates, however, like the potatoes that you described, the digestion of those foods are going to begin in the mouth, but they're going to occur primarily not in the stomach, but in the intestines, in the lower part of the GI tract, in primarily an alkaline environment. And the notion of food combining is that when you put that steak that needs to be digested in an acidic environment with those potatoes that need to be digested in an alkaline environment in the same meal and chew and swallow them in the same meal, you're going to slow the digestion of both of them because the potatoes are going to wait for the steak to be digested first. And in some people who, especially those who may have a sluggish digestive system or a sensitive digestive system, eating the steak and the potatoes together can result in symptoms like acid reflux, bloating or belching, or a feeling of indigestion or fullness or fatigue after a meal. That if they were to eat the steak separate from the potato, they would not experience that. And so I actually use the notion of food combining in my practice often, especially because I focus on gastrointestinal illness, to help people to better digest their food by reducing the burden, the complexity of a digestive task for the body. By separating foods that require more of an acidic environment, like proteins, and things like more acidic fruits, things like berries are often digested better together. Um, Salad greens go well with either category, but basically separating things like maybe salad and chicken from things like beans and brown rice, which is more of a carbohydrate centered meal that is well digested together, but not when you combine the two. And to your point, a lot of American favorites, things like a hamburger on a bun or meat and potatoes, or spaghetti and meatballs, are really recipes for indigestion for a lot of people for that reason.
Where can we find out more about food combining? Are there websites or anything that would tell people this is what you should mix and this is how you shouldn't mix it?
That is a great question. If you were to Google food combining, you would pop up with hundreds of sites. There's actually an article about it on my website, eatonpurpose.com.
Okay.
Um, if you go to the newsletter tab and put in the search food combining, there's an overview there of some of the simpler tenets of food combining that some folks may find helpful just as a place to begin. But it is a widely practiced concept in the kind of the alternative health arena, and is something easy for people to experiment with on their own and see if it brings them relief.
Okay. How about probiotics?
Mm. Wow, that's a meaty topic. We could do a whole show on probiotics.
I think we could do one on everything we've spoken about so far.
We could. um, Probiotics generally are supplements, usually in capsule form, of dormant beneficial bacteria. It's a fascinating science and shocking to many people, Glenn, to learn that in the human body we have tens of trillions of cells, but in a human gastrointestinal tract we have hundreds of trillions of microbes. They outnumber us 10 to 1. And in on many levels, our wellness depends on their wellness. And when someone takes a capsule or a dose of a probiotic, they're taking a little tiny amount of beneficial bacteria that are identical to the ones that we should have thriving in our gut. And because we do so many things in modern society that kills off these beneficial bugs, if you will, many people are suffering from a lack of beneficial bacteria in their gut, which can not only cause GI problems, but can actually trigger a whole host of immune system issues, including autoimmune disease. We do things like take a lot of over the counter medications, especially things like over the counter meds like acetaminophen and ibuprofen, Tylenol and Advil and Motrin. These are really toxic to those beneficial microbes. We eat foods that have chemicals in them, or a lot of preservatives, or a lot of pesticides, and that also kills off the microbial balance. And while a probiotic is a teeny fraction of a percentage of the amount that we should have overall in our gut, research does show that probiotic supplements are calming to the immune system. They help to balance the immune system in order to reduce symptoms or incidence of allergy and atopy in children. I use a lot of probiotics in my practice and recommending them to clients. And it's probably an everyday supplement that the vast majority of Americans could really benefit from taking, just in terms of promoting wellness, not getting sick as often, fewer colds, less flu, that type of thing.
There are a number of thank you for that, and there's a lot more that we should and could discuss on that.
That is two shows back to back. You know that.
Easily. Yeah.
I'm biting my tongue right now.
I know you are. I have to find out if the tongue is a protein, a carbohydrate, or a fat.
No, I didn't say I was eating it. I was just biting it.
If you bite it hard enough. So I want to talk about very quickly, we hear about bulimia, we hear about anorexia nervosa, a number of eating disorders that can be clinically disabling to people. There's a new one coming out. There's a new one out now, orthorexia. This is basically an obsession to eat healthy foods. And I just had a client who had something like that. And I found that I was having a difficult time at times to try and convince them that sometimes eating is okay, just not eating because not every food is perfect. What are your thoughts on that? Have you treated anyone with this eating disorder?
I have, and I'm glad you brought it up. I find that it's probably something that was unheard of 20 years ago, but as we learn more and more about chemicals and toxins and bacteria and other dangers in our food. Orthorexia is just a type of paranoia, I think, and obsession that people can develop neurologically with the need for every morsel of their food to be as supremely clean and healthy as possible. And while a general desire to eat healthily, I think, is good for all of us, when it turns into an obsession, it can cause quite a lot of anxiety. I actually worked with a woman a couple of years ago who would have panic attacks if she didn't feel like she could verify that every bite of her food in a given meal was organic. And that's really, I think, an unhealthy extreme. Glenn, a general guideline that I think is healthy for most of us is really anchoring our diet with, at most about 90% of food that we know is good for us and that's going to serve us. And then allowing the other 10% to just be fun. I don't believe in being the food police because I think, to your point, it makes us obsessed and probably unhappy. Food, it nourishes our bodies and it drives our biochemistry, but it's also entertainment. It's a big social vehicle in our lives. It's part of how we explore our world. And I believe in letting that kind of little bit of you be free, especially when anchored with the preponderance of a healthy diet, to allow that other piece to be free and eat what you really want, and to not worry so much. So I do think there's a balance there. And I think a lot of what we're learning about the dangers in food is promoting in some people this obsession. And to your point, it's not healthy.
I definitely trying to pursue health to the point of being unhealthy is not healthy.
Indeed, touche.
We talk about people obesity now. It's very big in our society and epidemic and almost pandemic around the world. And we always have said, oh, it's just about calories in, calories out. You're eating too much. Stop doing this. But science, again, has taught us that there are some new things that we're finding in our bodies called leptins and ghrelins, some of these hormones and amino acids that actually have some control over our hunger and our appetite and our satiety. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I can, and I'm delighted to because, as you said, obesity is essentially pandemic at this point, and I really want to encourage anyone listening to really, if you haven't heard it trumpeted enough, it is not about calories in, calories out. Certainly, calories do matter. But we're learning more and more that the body is not a dumb bucket where I put fat in my mouth and it shows up on my arms or in my belly. The body is an incredibly intelligent, self regulating organism that has been evolving for tens of thousands of years in order to try and help us to thrive in whatever food environment we might be in. And so some of us have more highly developed genetic abilities to store food for the future. And it's important to remember that the way the body does that is via fat. We may think of it as unsightly or inflammatory, but from an evolutionary perspective, fat was really important. It was what kept early man from starving to death during cold, lean winters. And leptin, we should start with leptin, is one of the primary hormones that we know has kept that from happening over millennia. Leptin is actually a hormone that, by and large, is made in our fat cells. It's made in adipocytes and circulates through the body and is actually penetrates the blood-brain barrier and informs our brain about the status of our body fat. And in a good, healthy body that is not obese, maybe overweight, but not obese, our fat cells secrete leptin, which goes into our brain, and it actually triggers communication specifically in our hypothalamus. And it tells our body that to slow down eating. And when you think about it, if you have more fat tissue, more fat cells, you should have more leptin talking to your brain to say, stop eating. And our brain will naturally turn down our appetite, turn down our sense for hunger, and we will eat less. And this is part of how the body regulates fat storage in order to keep us at a fairly constant weight over time, even though our eating may vary over a day, over a week, over month basis. And so, leptin is a key part of the natural hormonal regulation of both appetite and metabolism in the body. In addition to regulating hunger, leptin triggers a hormone cascade that changes our body's desire to burn body fat for fuel. Um, we're actually fully capable of using fat for fuel, not just sugars. And when we have a good leptin response, our body upregulates fat burning in order to keep us from storing too much fat. On the other hand, we have another hormone called ghrelin that is secreted in the tissue in the lining of our stomach, which promotes appetite, promotes hunger. It's stimulated by a number of things, including the emptiness of our stomach. It's one of the things that actually triggers the rumbling of the stomach that we associate with hunger, that can actually interrupt us out of another activity to go and eat. And ghrelin also penetrates the blood brain barrier and tells our brain, we're hungry, we need to eat, food looks good. It actually does that by triggering the release of a neurotransmitter called dopamine, which allows us to focus and get a reward, a biochemical reward from seeking food as well. So, a lot of appetite balance is about keeping leptin and ghrelin in balance. But unfortunately, when we get too fat, when we get too overweight, obese, our leptin signaling starts to fail, but our ghrelin signaling is working just as strong as ever.
Hmm.
And what happens is we can become leptin resistant, just like people with diabetes or prediabetes become insulin resistant. And our cells do not want to receive sugar anymore. They block themselves off from it and they just shut down for receiving sugar. Your brain can get so flooded with leptin signaling that it gets sick and tired of hearing that signaling, and it literally shuts down and just doesn't want to hear it anymore, and is unable to turn down your appetite. And so, even though the body is flooded with leptin because there's plenty of fat cells, the leptin signaling doesn't work. And unfortunately, there is a great tie between insulin resistance and leptin resistance. And this is one of the reasons why people who have prediabetes or insulin resistance find that their body fat increase really gets accelerated. Things tend to go downhill quickly. But we know that when people can begin to choose a low glycemic diet and one that helps to heal insulin resistance, that will actually help to heal leptin resistance as well and reestablish that signaling, which is very exciting in terms of self-healing of the body. It's not the kind of thing that happens overnight, but with a changed diet over a few months, that chemical signaling really will restore itself.
That was a really nice answer. I think that helped a lot of people. We're speaking with Tracy Harrison, a wellness and health consultant and coach who is a true scientist in the field of nutrition. Tracy, like we ask all of our guests, we wonder if you have a health tip for us.
I do, Glenn. I think out of everything that I have learned, if there's one thing in the nutritional arena that I think generally will help pretty much anyone in this modern day and age, it is to eat less wheat. Things made out of flour. A lot of people are working under the mistaken belief that as long as it's whole wheat or whole grain wheat, that it's okay. And what we're increasingly learning, especially in the past 10 years of nutritional science, is that that's not true. Even whole grain, stone ground, whole wheat bread still spikes blood sugar really terribly. And because of how much we've hybridized wheat as a plant, we've turned it into a substance that a lot of our immune systems are not sure whether that's a food or a foreign invader. And wheat is often at the root of some chronic inflammatory symptoms in my clients. So, whether it's for metabolic or inflammatory or immune system or gastrointestinal reasons, I find the vast majority of my clients feel better eating less and less wheat in their diet overall.
I find that too, but it's so hard, to start with that. Christina, any questions, any thoughts?
Well, before I go on to that, Glenn, I'd like to share some questions that came in.
Okay. Hard to imagine.
I told you all. One of them was, I've heard that it's actually a bad idea to drink water with your meal. Is this a myth or fact?
That is a great question. I find that drinking a lot of water immediately before a meal is a primary reason why a lot of my clients have acid reflux or indigestion.
Wow.
Absolutely. It is very important to be hydrated, but by far the healthiest times of day to hydrate is in between meals. And if you want to have a big glass of water to hydrate before a meal, I think that's fine, but I would recommend doing it about a half an hour before a meal. And the reason being that our digestion, good, swift, efficient, blissful digestion, depends on having good, strong, acidic stomach juices because we want to really break down those proteins quickly and efficiently. But if we put a lot of water into our stomachs right before we eat, that's really diluting the stomach acid and making it more alkaline, less acidic. It's like taking a little bottle of cleaner and diluting it 100-fold and expecting it to be as effective as a cleaner. It's not because it's diluted. And so I agree completely with what the viewer is proposing. It is best digestively to be hydrated for sure, but to hydrate away from meals, at least a half an hour before a meal so that your body has time to pass that water through before you begin the task of digestion.
So you're recommending not even drinking the water during the meal?
That's a great question. I certainly think maybe a little glass that you want to sip, maybe just to clear your throat or to cleanse your palate in between dishes. But a real little glass where you just sip a little bit as needed for those purposes rather than a big glass for purposes of hydrating.
Well, I have my wine, so I'm adding to the acidity.
Show that that a little bit of wine, if it's not too much, will actually assist digestion. Indeed, there's a reason why that's been an accompaniment to meals, again in moderation,
Mm-hmm.
but an accompaniment to meals for millennia.
Yes, yes. Oh, good. I'm doing the right thing. Another question is, I love a more Mediterranean-based diet, but have been told to stay away from nightshade veggies. Any thoughts?
Nightshade vegetables are a group of vegetables that have some proteins in common, which is why they're grouped together. It includes tomatoes and peppers and potatoes and eggplant primarily. And it's a category of vegetables that some people are sensitive to. And by that, I mean when they eat the foods, their immune system secretes antibodies as though it were responding to a foreign invader of some kind. And nightshades in particular are implicated often in arthritis. Arthritis is an inflammatory condition that, again, has a reason. And in many, many clients over the years, I've helped them to either significantly improve their arthritis or actually to get rid of it. And you have to find the culprit. And in some people, not anywhere near all, but in some people, nightshade vegetables are a trigger. And so it's not that there's a problem with all vegetables. It's just that those in particular, for their unique immune system, are inflammatory triggers. And in order to get the benefits from removing the inflammation, they really do have to eliminate those foods cold turkey, 100%. There's a couple of articles on my website about arthritis if folks want to learn more about nightshade vegetables and what's included in them and what that entails. There was actually a great editorial in the New York Times Magazine section just last month about foods being triggers for arthritis in a little boy, in a 5 or 6-year-old little boy that my heart went out to his parents. They struggled for a year to find the root cause of it and identified food. In that case, not nightshades. I think it was gluten and dairy containing foods were that little boy's triggers. But in many cases, there is a food or a cluster of foods that their immune systems think is a foreign invader, and it's triggering the production of inflammatory chemicals that tend to cluster in joints. and be the source of that inflammation buildup that causes so much pain and discomfort.
Thank you. One more question is if I'm in a third world country and I'm afraid to drink the water, like in Mexico City, for example, would this be a mild form of orthorexia?
I think it would be a more than a mild form of intelligence. um, Wow, we need to drink a lot of water, and I think in the sense that we consume more air than we do water, and more water than we do food. I think doing the best we can to find clean sources of water is really important. Now, having said that, it's important not to be dehydrated because dehydration starts all sorts of biochemical badness in the body. You have to do the best you can with what's available. But I think even simple water filtration, even very simple using like a Brita charcoal filter, that type of filtering is so much better than not filtering at all. But something to try and get some of the heavy metals, some of the chlorine and fluorine and that sort of thing out of our water is a giant step in the right direction. And doesn't it's not that expensive in terms of filtering whatever may come into your household. So I recommend doing what you can, and then beyond that, really accepting that your body does have methods for detoxifying. And when we do the best we can to keep from overloading those pathways, our body does have pathways for overcoming those toxins and processing and getting rid of them. So it's not that the body can't handle any toxins. It's just that generally our long term wellness is best served when we do the best we can to screen them out before we consume them. So I think it's about balance. But sometimes simple solutions, like just the filtering pitchers can make a big difference.
So I do, now it's my turn. I know we're sort of past the top of our hour, but getting back to what you were speaking about with the wheat and the glutens and things like that, do you find that there is a difference between the breads that are sprouted wheat breads as opposed to the regular flours?
That's a great question. And in some people, yes. So sprouted grains in general. I mean, if people are going to eat wheat, I do recommend the sprouted forms of grains, mostly because for the majority of people, they are easier to digest.
Mm.
Despite the fact that our American food culture is obsessed with grains, they are relative newcomers in the food culture for humans. We've really only had grain agriculture for a little less than 10,000 years, and humans have been around for many, many times longer than that. And there are a number of cultures that are just not well genetically adapted to processing the seeds from grasses, which is what grains are. And so some people find they digest the sprouted grains better. Other people find the sprouted grains give them more indigestion. There is some nutritional research showing that the sprouted grains may have higher levels of lectins, which are essentially markers on proteins in foods that can trigger our immune systems to respond to them negatively. But the bottom line is wheat is still wheat. I mean, that's the primary answer to your question. Wheat is still wheat. If people are going to eat it, they might explore or experiment with which feels better from a digestive perspective. I do find it varies, but it's still wheat. And in general, I find that switching to sprouted grains when it's the immune system that's reacting to a food, not the gastrointestinal system, not a digestive issue, but the immune system that's responding to a food, like with headaches or eczema or um, allergy of some kind. It doesn't really matter whether it's sprouted. The body is still reacting to it as a foreign protein.
So if an individual really needs to have their breads, it's like the steak and potatoes you were saying, Glenn. Is being Asian, we don't really come from the steak and potatoes, but the Portuguese side does. If they really have to have their breads, would you recommend they do something like a spelt bread or an Ezekiel bread?
I do think for the majority of people, the reaction I'm talking about is really not so much about gluten. I mean, we're kind of obsessed with gluten free, which definitely plays a role in some other arenas. And again, that's a whole nother talk session. But for most people, it's about wheat. So, to your point, choosing other grains, even if they contain gluten, like whole rye. Whole rye is a fabulous bread that's actually preferred in a lot of European countries. It's quite low glycemic. It's been shown to actually deactivate a number of genes that promote metabolic syndrome. So, whole rye, whole barley, spelt is another option as well. These tend to be better choices than just wheat. Um, and again, wheat, unfortunately, is the primary grain that we've really hybridized the heck out of it over the past 50 years, 50, 60 years in particular. So that the wheat we're consuming today is certainly not the wheat that my grandmother grew up on, not even close. It is a different plant. So biochemically, it looks different to our immune system. So I really recommend people explore other alternative whole grain breads. Things like Ezekiel bread is a multi-grain, but it does still include wheat in it. Most Ezekiel bread is a multi-grain. It's very often sprouted, but it does still include wheat.
Mm.
So I think there's an opportunity to explore different breads. Some people find that when they eat a sourdough bread, the fermentation specifically of the microbes that are in sourdough as a fermenting agent helps to denature the proteins enough so it's not as inflammatory to their body, which is a really interesting learning. It's an ongoing area of research in nutritional science. So I really recommend people explore what makes them feel best. You know, eat purposefully, take notes. What do you eat that the next day makes you feel better versus what do you eat that the next day doesn't make you feel so well? I think most of us could really do with being a little more insistent on choosing food that makes us feel fantastic. There's really no reason why we shouldn't feel fantastic every day.
Oh, I'm all with you on that one. That one makes me bounce.
I am grateful to our very special guest, Tracy Harrison, a wellness and health consultant and coach and a true nutrition scientist, for sharing her wisdom and expertise with us. And I look forward to many more episodes with Tracy if you're willing to do that. I know we have a lot of questions and a lot of areas that are really going to be beneficial for all of our viewers and listeners. I'd also like to thank all of my teachers and healers for allowing me on my journey. And I thank you all for joining us today. Look forward to traveling next week with Christina as we explore another quadrant of the healthcare galaxy, searching for health. Tracy, I would like to thank you again so much for being part of today's show. And until our next meeting, I wish you all optimal health.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tracy, for honoring our community. This was such a blast, but it's like, well, we don't want it to be over yet.
I appreciate the opportunity.
And we'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us on this new platform of education and information. We're grateful for your continuous support and look forward to hearing your feedback on how we can serve you better. We invite you to join us live every Tuesdays for Magical Medical Tour at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 1:30 Eastern Time. Wednesdays for Trinity of Life at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Followed every other week with Flowing into Awareness with Anatara. You can always contact Dr. Glenn Woolman at myyogahub.com/GWoolman or follow him on Twitter at Glenn Woolman. And of course, you can reach him through his own site, glennwoolman.com. And be sure to learn about his Metaphor Square Breath. Until we meet again, namaste.
That was easy.
No, it wasn't, because it wasn't so easy to wrap this one up.
How fun. But aren't these topics exciting? I mean, I think nutrition is sexy.
Oh,
It's fun.
I am right with you. I want to get a budget to fly you out here and do some educating. I just got I was just telling Glenn last month they implemented in the school system here in Los Angeles, in the public system, certain schools in the inner cities that they have breakfast in the classrooms. Because the parents weren't even able to get their children there on time, 10 minutes before the bell rings, to receive their breakfast. So they begun to implement the breakfast in the classroom. So when the bell rings, they go to their class, they eat breakfast for 15, 20 minutes, jamming that food down while they're having instructional time. But at least the children are getting food in their stomachs.
As non-ideal as that might be, I think I'm so grateful that they're getting it and they're getting an opportunity to eat. And I think the
Yes.
number that are sent off to school today with no food is heartbreaking
Yes.
because I couldn't concentrate. I don't know how a 5-year-old is expected to concentrate. I couldn't concentrate without breakfast.
It's really ridiculous. I mean, some of them arrive there, and I'm working. I am one of the volunteers, so I go in every day, and to watch some of these 5-year-olds who haven't even had dinner from the night before. It's, as you say, it's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking when they're looking at, and they've just completed all their breakfast, and they're looking and going, is there more? It's like, oh, very, very hard to stomach that. But of course, here I am. My son packs his lunch and breakfast every day. So he has his home food that he brings from home. And I pick up all the packages and I read them. And I finally approached the principal the other day and I said, excuse me, I said, if I'm willing, would you give me the blessings to possibly make this into a pilot elementary school to change the food? And he looked and he laughed and he said, oh, yes.
Yeah. The research on this is really very clear, Christina, that when you bring different food into a school environment, kids do better.
Oh, yeah.
Better behaved, their whole quality experience as little people at school is better. They have better grades. I don't think this is up for discussion anymore. We just have to have the social and the economic will to prioritize it.
Yes, I agree. It's about banding together and creating the change. And he did say, I'll give you the blessings, but the school board is another thing. And I said, well, it's about gathering the parents together. We're the taxpayers. And if we really want it, we have to make it happen. And it's a pilot program. Let's just try. Let's, one drop is 1,000 waves. Even if we can change one meal for the next year. I just met the principal of another high school where she approached, we just got into talking and she says, oh my gosh, you're right in line with what I'd like to do. And she's actually gotten the blessings to be the pilot high school down here in Southern California to change, all the vending machines and the foods in the cafeteria. So it's just, as I say, it's so exciting. And even though I feed my son what I feed him, the friends and they always look over at his lunchbox and go, what's that? Why are you eating that yogurt every day? Why do you get so much fruit and vegetables?
There's a famous chef at a private school in Manhattan called Chef Bobo, who and he's a chef and he only hires employees for his school kitchen who are also culinary students. And he's written a book, actually a cookbook, and it's amazing what he gets these kids to eat. But part of his formula for success is bringing food into the classroom. And he'll come in with a big stalk of Brussels sprouts and explain to kids, this was growing in the garden out back. Do you know what this is? And let's talk about it. And you're going to be seeing this in your lunch a few times in the next week. And maybe bringing in samples for the kids to try. It sounds so luxurious, but it's very cheap to provide this type injection of nutrition and food education for children. We just have to do it. But he talks about, how how much fun it's been bringing this education to kids and how much kids want to participate and offering after school cooking lessons. And they get to spend elective time out in the garden in the back, tending to the vegetables that they're later going to eat. And it just, kids get passionate about things they can be involved in.
Hmm.
And I certainly have seen that if I can get in a kitchen and help a child to prepare with their own hands a healthy dish, they have to really hate it to not eat it
Right,
because
right.
their pride is caught up in it, and it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I'm right with you on that. I love that. Now it's getting the parents in on it. That's the next step. The kids are one thing. They're actually, they're easy to influence. It's the parents.
In
It's
many cases, it is absolutely,
yeah.
and part of it is not. I mean, it's certainly not ill intentioned. It's just the belief of I'm going to spend money on that. I'm going to put time into making it, and there's no way they're going to eat it. And it's sort of shooting themselves in the foot before they even begin.
Yes.
I think lots of times parents really benefit just from some education about making healthy eating fun. How do you turn it into a game so that it stops being this dread of, here we go again, I'm going to serve something healthy and they're going to there's going to be a fight. There are ways around that. And I think parents really benefit from some tools in order to help to facilitate that.
Yes, yes. Oh, this is like so much fun. We could go on for days.
Yeah, I think so. I think all of your questions were answered. All of my questions or our questions were answered very nicely by you.
Beautiful.
And it just left it so that it's clear that we could take each of those topics. We could have a discussion on probiotics. We could have a discussion on. We didn't even discuss reading labels or raw foods and a number of other things that I want to go over. So we need to have you back again. But
No, Glenn, it's like I was sitting here thinking, no, we have to do a show, just Tracy Harrison show.